On the last video, I showed you the basics of how to deal with the piano roll and how to edit all of your MIDI using nothing but your keyboard and your mouse with tons of shortcuts. Today, I will show you some drum sequencers in Reaper that are really useful and that can fit different workflows in case you're having a hard time programming drums because like just writing it on the piano roll is not as comfortable for you. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and let's get into it. So again, I have different sessions for different ways of programming drums. I'll show you first how to use them and then how to install them. But pretty much everything can be downloaded and imported from as a RIA script or a RIA pack or something like that. So Sower is based on visually the interface of FL Studio. And what I did for this one is I have a track template that I have showed you many times how to save it by just finishing everything of your configuration and saving as a track template, and you can just drag it anytime. So once you run it as an action, it will open up something like this. I select the track, I go into this small arrow, and I add a channel to it. And in this case, I'm going to add the channel Sower, and the MIDI channel is going to be number 1, and the pitch is going to be C1. So after running Sower, since I'm not doing multi-track drums, I'm doing a single track plugin, as usual, the XO by XLN Audio. I want to switch it first to single channel mode, and I want to select the channel that's called Sower in this case. And once I click it OK, now I can see I have those MIDI notes at sight. I have a mouse modifier, so whenever I hold Command and left click the bottom, I can see the inline editor. And as you can see, I have some drums written down here that I will just change by clicking in this small icon up top next to the magnifying glass. And if I can't see the notes, I can use the next icon that's a couple of arrows to scroll up or down. But now I can see all of the MIDI notes also on my Sower. And I can see that I should start on a C2, so I will just go into it. And whenever I select those and I'm looking at that clip, it's going to follow my cursor, as you can see. I could extend the amount of bars that this Sower script is looking at. And this 5 with 2 arrows will only let me scroll between bars. So I know like the first thought would be to go there, and that's going to change the amount of bars that you are looking at. But it's the next number that's by default 16 that shows you what you're looking at. So I want to show it up top right here that whenever I write a new note, it's going to also show up on my piano roll. So if I set up a new line completely, this is going to be a lot faster for editing or adding MIDI notes on my drums. If you want to change anything else, you can just click on the options icon as usual and adjust whatever things you might need for your own personal workflow, like the channel label, the grid cells, if you're going to follow something, if you want to change the skin of Sower itself into different colors that you might enjoy a bit more, that's according to you. I think FL Studio is probably the smoothest one on the eyes. And here on the F, you can open the MIDI processor, and this has to do with aligning velocities, moving the length of the MIDI notes, excluding and editing overall. And the only icon left is this one with a couple of bars between the F, right before the F. And this is going to display the velocity settings, the offset, or the length of the notes. If you select, for example, the E2, you can just program stuff using the velocity, and that's also really fast. Again, I'd rather have an action. I haven't customized this custom toolbar yet, but I'd rather have an action right here that opens up Sower. And if necessary, I can just repeat a couple of those steps. I would recommend that if you are working with Sower, do it once. And as I have shown using the toolbars in Reaper that I think are crucial for making your workflow as fast as possible, is that I would rather open up Sower that if you close it within a session, you have to set it up again. Left click here, switch to single channel, left click on the arrow on the display and switch to single channel mode if it's not showing that. When I'm setting up a channel, I'll just go look for this one, and that works. You can drag the window itself. So if you're not looking at something, try dragging it. If you already have some sort of track template for drums where you're using one single plugin that has multiple channels out, and you just want to create the Sower mapping for that, you can just select all of the tracks that you want to add to Sower, switch into multi-channel mode, and add selected tracks, and you don't have those extra steps that you don't need. That's some of the difference that you might want to work with. And if you have this option set up to insert a MIDI item in case none is existing, that works great because I can start programming my drums and you will see that here is my MIDI item. And I can just start programming everything here. And it's showing up per track. That's super useful if you have something set up where you have a MIDI from and then an audio out, or however you're routing your plugin. Again, at the end of the video, we'll show you how to install all of them. We also have the sequencer Mega Baby and the Baby version 2. Most of the difference only have to do with amount of things you can add to it. Remember, this has to be before the virtual instrument that you're trying to program into. If you want something a lot simpler, use the Baby ones. If you want something a bit more creative, you can go into the sequencer Mega Baby. So as usual, what you are looking at is most of the times a 16 step because it's a 16 subdivision of a 4/4. And again, you have the node names right here that are C1, C2. And when you're programming drums, sometimes that's hard to remember because you don't know which C is what. So you might want to create a MIDI mapping of the names so you know which one is what. And I can see it on my plugin and I can see it here. Like that's the whole idea of it. So I could program something very simple. And I can create a really fast pattern just like that. If you want to move all of your MIDI notes because you have something that's not working, you can just drag this green space on the piano up top. You can save a ton of patterns. I don't remember the amount, but you can save a lot of patterns for different sections of your song. And that's super useful because then you can just switch from one to another. And as usual, if you open up the envelopes and look for the name of the parameter that you are trying to automate, MIDI sequencer patterns, you make it active, visible, and armed. Now you can edit that envelope so that on a specific part of your song, you're doing this pattern, and then you jump into pattern number 2 or something, and then you jump into a break pattern, and then you go back into it. As you see, whenever I move my cursor, the patterns are changing, and that lets me switch up my drums really fast. The one thing that I really love about this one, is that underneath we have the usual CC changes and such. But if I left click and hold and bring it down 2 steps, that's going to be the 127 CC, it says PRB, that means probability. And for me, that's so crucial for programming a couple of styles and genres when you want a little bit of more liveliness to your instruments. So if I select my snares and I add a little bit of probability into the steps that are not being played, most important to be specifically that rhythm or that groove, I can use this to create ghost notes across my drums. I would honestly suggest that you look for a second snare that's muted, that's low pass, so you can add that second snare that's a little bit more ghost noted. So for example, I'm going to use the second snare. I'm going to low pass it quite a bit. I'm going to decrease a lot of the volume of it. I'm going to filter it quite a bit. That way, whenever you run it, but if I lower a lot the probability of this and I go back, and now I can really add all of the textures. So my first mistake would be to think that this is affecting all of the MIDI notes. But you can see that right here on the left, you have a 1, and that's at the MIDI channel. So I can just change probability to 2, and I can change that snare to 2, and now I can play it again. Of course, you have to check that your plugin also is receiving that MIDI channel. In the case of UV Workstation, because of how it's routed internally, that node that's going through input through the input of channel 2 is not going to be able to reach the plugin. So there might be a couple of things where you might run into some issues, and I think that should clear most of your questions. So if something is not working properly, you could either double this thing or just load some sort of sample in this part where you have just one single drum that's only a snare. And in the case of UV Workstation, what you would do is this second layer is only of your ghost notes of whatever you're doing, and this first layer is of your full drums. Again, it's just being creative engineering wise. So in the case of Excellent Audio, that plugin is listening to all of the MIDI channels. So I could just program on number 2 on MIDI channel 2, lower the probability, and just draw this across all 16th notes. That way, it's happening from time to time in very specific places if you want it to be only on very specific places. But I also think this is a very interesting way to program your drums. You have a little bit of swing, you can increase or lower the length of your notes. Remember that you can always record the MIDI out of this by right-clicking the arm button and recording the output MIDI. And whenever you hit record, you're going to have all of it right there. And then you can combine this with exploding the MIDI notes into multi-channel, and now you have the events in different tracks and so on and so on.
And if you like this kind of videos, in the description down below, I have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to support my work. I will keep on making videos. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell, subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, and share this video if it helped you in any way. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.